In late 2012 and into early 2013, I began experiencing an increase in energy that felt like I was almost on a perpetual acid trip. In the months ahead, there were circumstances in my life that triggered some deep realizations and catalysts within me that led me to ultimately leaving a relationship that I had been in for 16 years and inevitably dropped me into the ocean of consciousness, of God consciousness, of profound visions and a silencing of my ego, and just in such a way that I didn't experience time normally for many, many years. And through this process of self-realization, awakening, or dark night of the soul, many things became clear to me in terms of my work in the world and who I actually am. Here to actualize and experience and communicate ultimately. And in 2016, this message came through, and I'll read it to you. As a messenger of love, I am guided by Spirit to be a voice for change, to help the masses in making the shift into a new paradigm. This movement being towards a greater quality of life and living on this planet. This can happen as we learn to live from the inside out. Through the expansion of our self-awareness and helping individuals towards their realization of their potential for personal empowerment, we can change this world on a massive scale, guys, one sincere interaction at a time. We accomplish this by going within ourselves and developing a deep understanding for how our hearts and minds operate. As we learn to decode the truth of our personal reality, we begin moving through separation or victimization consciousness that has been prevalent in modern society, and to widen our circle of compassion towards our realization of unity awareness, where participation and shared responsibility is truly the way that nature, energy, and love inherently operates from. I believe that as of late 2012, we have moved into a new cycle or age here on Earth. And we are now in the early stages of ushering in this new age of Aquarius, where a greater sense of unity and teamwork for the common good shall become part of the mass awareness or norm at some future point, through the gateway of love as understanding that is continually opening here in this planet each day. In order to achieve the task of assisting creation and ushering in the next stage of human conscious evolution, people like myself have been sent here to Earth on assignment during this time period as representatives for light or information, and to hold the frequency of love as discernment, compassion, and ultimately understanding. This is simply the way the universe works to evolve individual and collective consciousness. And now is the time to introduce a new model or template for living and being. Despite the perceptions and experience of much chaos, which is a necessary process for growth and change, a greater quality of lifestyle and living is being birthed right before our very eyes. I am here to assist you in gaining insights and unique perspectives that will support your journey in ever-expanding self-awareness and the cultivation of universal love in relationship with yourself, most importantly, and ultimately in relationship with all of life.
Yeah, so what would be the greatest way that I could experience this unlimitedness that I pray about every day?
Yeah, just enjoy it, my dear friend. You see, you can't put it in a bottle, and you can't give it a name. Ultimately, part of the plan as you grow into greater and greater love is as you are on a quest for love. Suddenly, you become that, and no longer are you seeking it, but you're just the full expression of it.
Hello, my preciouses. Welcome to the brand spanking new I Bring Water show. This is the pilot episode, EP1, and we're here. We're doing this. I'm communicating with you. I'm connecting with you. I'm here for you. I'm here to create a profoundly intimate relationship with you. I'm here to inspire you. I'm here to help enlighten you on your path to creating the most beautiful and abundant and connected relationship with yourself and life that is available. When I first met the love of my life, the first few months, we had some interactions before we got separated because we had triggered essentially the enlightenment kind of experience, or the twin flame awakening through our connection in a lot of ways. And one of the first things I said to her was that I don't fake the funk. And so if you guys are looking for a real and a raw podcast that is unlike anything that you've ever experienced before, you've certainly come to the right place. I've taken quite a long time in my life to actually put myself in a position to introduce myself to the world. I've done a tremendous amount of inner work, not just in this life, but in past lives, to really prepare me for this entrance into mass consciousness, into the public eye, into my spiritual work, if you will. So a few years after I had my awakening experience that started in early 2013, I think it was 2015, I did a talk radio show, an internet talk radio show, and I ended up doing like maybe 6 or 7 or 8 episodes. And I really had a lot of fun doing it. And, I was in a really bad place in my life on a spiritual level, on a personal level. I was in a really dark place. But, looking back on it, I realized how much potential was there and how creative I was. I was starting to through my awakening experience and my dark night of the soul and my separation with the twin flame type thing, which we can go into in another show. But, fortunately, dreams have always provided me with some type of an insight in terms of, how to kind of settle down my consciousness or settle my ego or settle my energy in my life. And I think it was, 6 months after, kind of meeting my twin flame and the awakening process and then leaving my marriage, that I woke up from a dream and I heard the message. It was, there will come a time when you and David have to spend some time apart to develop your individuate. And I had no idea what that was. But I started researching online, what does that mean, David? What is that? And I came across the concept of the Star of David, or the Shield of God, and the divine masculine and feminine. And I realized through my intuitive and my psychic and all of the experiences that I was going through and awakening my clairaudient skills, that we were essentially one with God in a lot of ways, her and I, and that I needed to chill out because there was so much transformation and healing that needed to take place. We were always together, but always separate, and that continues to this day. And again, we can go, more into that relationship and that twin flame awakening, which I'll do on a show here in the near future during, season 1 of the I Bring Water show. But my point is, dreams dreams have always had a way of kind of, especially in the last 10 or so years of my life, of kind of leading me to the next steps, or to kind of showing me the way, and helping me to settle and calm. And so a few years back, I was in the dark and I was in a dream, and I remember this dream when I woke up, and they said, it was like a collective voice, a unison voice, a group that said, you need to stop feeling for yourself. You need to stop feeling sorry for yourself. And they said, you have to come out. And there was a doorway, and everything was dark. And I intuitively understood that it was a group of beings that were speaking to me in unison. And I said, is it safe to come out, obviously? And so that was a few years ago, maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I'm finally, getting started with the pilot episode of this podcast. And my point is that beings that are particularly sensitive, because of the history in this world, of how judgmental and closed-minded society generally is, there's a cautiousness to beings that may be a little mystical in nature, or intuitive in nature, or sensitive in nature. And so for me, I've taken quite a long time to prepare myself to develop a certain authentic confidence and sense of security in my own body, which has taken a long time to really feel safe in, and to finally bring myself out into the world. And so this summer, I woke up from a dream, and they said audio, and so I thought about that, and I understood, like, audio. Okay, it's time. The way that I'm going to bring myself and my message and my mission out into the world is going to be through creating a podcast. And so I started the preparatory steps that are needed to start creating the product that you're hearing right now. And so here we are. One thing that I'd like to share with you guys before we get going on this podcast is, I read a book in my early 20s called Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And it's one of the most inspirational books that you'll ever read. And it's one of my favorite books. And it starts out, which piqued my interest. The beginning of it says, he writes, I find my earliest memories covering the anachronistic features of a previous incarnation. And so he goes on to say, I still remember the helpless humiliation of infancy. I was resentfully conscious of being unable to walk and to express myself freely. On the next page, he writes, my far-reaching memories are not unique. Many yogis are known to have retained their self-consciousness without interruption by the dramatic transition to and from life and death. I share this with you because I am here to be a mirror of possibilities for you, and to help you to recognize and realize and understand that you are truly unlimited. Your consciousness and your capacity for love is unlimited. And Paramahansa reminded me of that when I was on my spiritual journey, and seeking to surrender myself to love and God in my early 20s, and reading his book. And one of the things that he writes in this book is that, you have come to earth to entertain and to be entertained. So with that said, let's do this, guys. Before we jump into the body of this podcast, let's take a moment of clarity with respect to who I am and to my relationship with you, the listener. I am a father, a friend, a lover. I am a humanitarian. I am a contemplative mystic. I am an ET soul having a human experience. I am a messenger of love, or a teacher. I am real, raw, spirit and body. I am in many ways love personified. I am clairaudient, meaning I can sometimes feel and hear impressions, messages, and words from spirit. I am an artist, a philosopher, a culture curator, a storyteller, an entertainer, And most importantly, I am a mirror of possibilities here to support you in exploring your inner self more fully. I am not a historian. I am not a scholar. I am not an astrologer. I am not an economist. I am not affiliated with any political or religious group or party. I am not a medical professional of any sort. I am not a guru. I am not better than you, nor am I more special than you, more spiritual, or more connected to God than you are. I am not a researcher per se, but I am more of an observer or deeply curious learner committed to following my passions and to expanding my understanding of the physical and spiritual dimensions of reality and the interconnectedness of life and creation, which I believe is powered by this force that we can call God, or love, or the Divine Mother, or whatever suits you, me, us individually. And when I say this, I am not speaking of a biased male sky god built on the image of man's limited and often judgmental and fear-based ego. I'm speaking of an all-loving God within you, inside your heart. This source, I believe, is imbued in everything, and it sustains all that we experience in both self and other, seen and unseen. Life at its core being pure intelligence and grace. With that said, it is your sole responsibility to ultimately discern what feels true, appropriate, and valuable information for you personally, as you are on your own very unique journey in this chosen life. If some of the information on my podcast helps you to grow in your self-awareness and it helps you to improve your mindset or quality of relationships in life in general, then absolutely beautiful. If some or all of this work doesn't resonate with you, then that's a beautiful thing too. Because, we're all a product of grace and a work in progress and ever growing and expanding. And so not everything is meant for everyone. Truth is, I am here to contemplate and explore human conscious potential alongside you. My intention is that we might ultimately learn to free ourselves from our individual and collective illusions of separation. As Bob Marley wrote in the lyrics of Redemption Song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And I'm not here to perpetuate pain or suffering any further on this beautiful planet. We've suffered long enough, generation after generation here. And we are choosing to take a different direction now. So this pilot episode is basically an opportunity for me, the host, and you, the listener, to really get a sense for, what this show is about, who I am, and if you feel in alignment really in terms of the work that I'm here to bring to the world. So, before I started, I basically, more recently, I've made, 2 commitments to myself about this show. And the commitments are, to be a storyteller, really to create a production that is entertaining and that is something that that you guys actually love and really look forward to when a new episode drops. And the most important commitment I made to myself is that I share my full and authentic self with you. That means all of the parts of me, all of the parts that come out in personal conversations that aren't recorded on a podcast, that I share all of the stuff that's not necessarily pretty or comfortable to share with the public, and that that I express my full self, that I express my my sense of humor, which is actually pretty good and pretty silly, and that I'm not just always this serious spiritual teacher, if you will, always talking about serious subjects, but that I give myself really a platform to express all of my artistic aspects. So this is truly God's work. The last 20 years of my life has been given to God to be a full expression of God's love, and with that, I've decided that the episodes will be dropped. When they are dropped, they will be dropped on Sundays. So you can expect to see that, here on Spotify, and likely at midnight on Sunday, 12 a.m. Sunday morning. So, and then also at this point, we are planning on doing the audio version here on YouTube as well. Recognize that not everybody has a paid subscription in terms of having access to Spotify, and I think that putting it on YouTube as well will be a great opportunity to build an audience there as well. So initially, this audio format is best for my setup currently. In the future, I will plan on having a studio set up and likely doing more of a Joe Rogan podcast type setup, potentially, in terms of bringing some of the guests in. I still like the opportunity to have standalone shows, in terms of the format being, sometimes it'll be just me having an individual session here, in terms of kind of talking about a subject or delving into a subject, or kind of explaining processes in terms of our personal development. But there will also be opportunities where there'll be a video versions, and there'll be guests, and there will be studios, and there'll be kind of that conversational dynamic, which actually I love the most, because I find me personally being the most creative when I have that opportunity to have that conversational setting. So there'll be both, and so, but for right now, this is an audio version. And we will also be having a guests on the audio version of the I Bring Water show, which, to be honest, I actually think the audio version allows people to have a more intimate experience in terms of just focusing on the energy embedded within the words. So I think there's pluses and minuses to audio and video, and both, obviously. So in terms of the I Bring Water show episodes, they will run continuously, but we will do a season format, meaning that the seasons will run from January to, let's say, early October, late September, early October, and then they will cease for a few months, and then we'll start back up in January again. But the episodes will be concurrent. So therefore, if I do 12 episodes in season 1, when we start season 2, it'll be episode 13 through 24 or whatever. So that's kind of how we're going to format this. Now, in terms of my interests as an individual, I am not a man of limitation in any way, shape, or form, and therefore we are going to talk about a lot of different cool ass shit on this podcast. We're going to talk about popular culture. We're going to talk about current events. We're going to talk about social consciousness, fashion, streetwear, sneakers, technology, music, film, the automotive industry, art, design, sport. MMA is something that I really follow. Health, lifestyle, food, exercise, entrepreneurship, middle management, work-life balance, leadership, domestic life, marriage, sex, parenting, We're going to talk about topics of sexual identity, which are a real big thing going on here in society right now. We'll talk about the educational system and the opportunity for some reform here in the future. We'll talk about local and global humanitarian efforts. We'll talk about recycling and sustainability, because for me, that's something that I really feel that's important as we move forward on this planet. We'll talk about mysticism, self-actualization, transformation, that process, which, I've spent the last 8 years or so of my life going through. We'll talk about the healing of the soul, astrology, numerology. We'll talk about ETs. We'll talk about, the different, potentially I'd really like to explore in the years ahead some of the different ET races and maybe connecting with some folks who've really done some legitimate research on that. So I have so many interesting interests in my life. And obviously most closest to my heart is, the topic centered around relationship and love. So that's always going to be at the forefront of this work. In terms of the primary focuses for this program, it's going to be about, there's going to be 3 tenets. It's going to be, personal empowerment and, personal spiritual development, you as an individual, learning to love yourself and nurture yourself. It's going to be about offering, relationship skills in terms of how to navigate the world, not only in your workplace, but obviously at home in relationship with your family and your children. And then the last piece being quality of life. I really feel like my work is centered around helping to create a framework so folks can ultimately bring all of those skills together, that relationship with self, the relationship with those outside of themselves, and then to bring that together and to create a truly nurturing life that is imbued, that is aligned and imbued with a tremendous value fulfillment. A little about, my personal story. I grew up in Stockton, California, the 209, which has become, made famous more recently by the Diaz brothers. And in fact, I believe Nick's first coach, Steve Heath, which is kind of an underground King of Stockton legend, here in this area, is a friend of mine, and is going to be a guest on the second episode of this podcast. So it's going to be a really good show. We usually have some pretty good conversations, me and Steve. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So I grew up in Stockton, and a really diverse area in the world, in California, in the Central Valley. And I believe it's really provided me with an opportunity to really understand, the masses in a lot of ways because of the tremendous diversity, cultures and stuff. And it's kind of like a melting pot. So I was really always too sensitive, a quiet, sensitive, mystical boy. And that's what my sister said, that I was really quiet. But then when I spoke, I spoke with these really, really big words that really didn't fit the circumstances from which I grew up in. And so that was odd, I guess. And the thing was that I was always like far too empathic or hyper empathic, in a sense that I was so sensitive to the energy in my environment, basically for all of my school years up till maybe 16 was kind of when I read my first book, where I could actually slow down my energy enough to be able to concentrate or pay attention. And I think in modern times, these are the kind of children that, tend to get diagnosed or they put, put on medication or maybe not. I don't know. I just know that I cheated all the way through school, and I didn't do the work because I couldn't focus, but also I think it was because it wasn't relevant to me. I had no interest in it. It was like I came from somewhere else, and I was really not interested so much in learning what the educational system had to offer me. There was no curiosity there. It was dry. It was, I don't know. I think we can delve into those topics a lot more in terms of sensitive children in the world, or children that maybe are focused in different aspects of their consciousness. But I really had no interest in fact, I got kicked out of high school, I think in my my junior year, early junior year, for coming to school drunk. And I ended up going to a kind of that continuation version of school in the area for the last few years. And then that's where I met a really nice teacher for the first time, who really had a lot of self-awareness, and I started reading books and started kind of moving into myself a little bit more. And it was around that time I'd got a job at this little place called Soup Peddler or whatever, as a dishwasher, probably making like $4.25 an hour. So kind of give you an idea of where how old I am. But interestingly enough, I was hanging around with this kid named Brian, and he's kind of a troublemaker, but we got along for the most part. And one day he stopped over at his buddy John's house, and I guess John was this guy who was about 11 years older than me, and he was also working at this Soup Peddler joint. They made soups and salads or whatever. They were kind of supposed to be like health food or something. But so anyway, I just listened to this guy speak for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden I basically replied to him. I basically broke down his whole life, his fears, his insecurities, his struggles, his judgments, and I mirrored it back to him. And he pretty much kicked me out of his house. and I share the story because it's like, I've always had the ability to read energy. I've always had the ability to understand empathically, where people are coming from and the human condition. And so he kicked me out of his house, and I didn't know the guy from anything. And it turns out he ended up moving months later to apartment complex, Mariner's apartment complex that me and my sister were living at. And he knocked on my door or whatever. And so we ended up partying, man, for like, I don't know, a couple years together, on that from 16 to 18 or whatever, and that time frame where I was finishing high school. And again, he was a bunch older than me, but we had some really interesting conversations, and we were contemplating the nature of reality. And there was this one weekend that we were hanging out, and we were partying that whole weekend, and we weren't on acid or on any like hallucinogens. It was just a regular party weekend, and we were sitting out in the driveway of this duplex that I lived with. We had, me and my mom, my sister had moved. It was on the other side of the freeway of the Mariner's apartment complex, and he still lived on the other side of the freeway in those apartments. And we were watching this thing in the sky, and it would just stop and go and stop and go, and it was just trippy as shit, and we didn't know what the fuck it was. And then all of a sudden we saw this fire in the sky, like a comet or something, I don't know, it's just shooting across the sky. And we were like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, like this thing that we were watching was kind of like getting a little bit closer. And then it was like Sunday night or whatever, and I had to start school. I had to go to this adult school. I had just graduated from high school. I was some credits short from getting my my diploma, and so I had to get ready to go to adult school to fucking get my diploma. And I start walking him towards the levee way where he could run across the freaking Highway 5, so that he could run across and get back to that Mariner's apartment complex that was on the other side of the freeway. And this UFO started getting closer and closer to us, and then all of a sudden this thing fucking came over us, And it wasn't like a saucer UFO. It was a legit mothership. This thing was so fucking massive. You really couldn't see the beginning and the end. And I don't know how long we sat under it. It must have been maybe 10 or 20 minutes is my best recollection. And it had a few blinking lights, but it was completely silent. And it really just blew my mind. And so then he ran across the freeway, and then I walked back home, and it was still out there, man. And I told my sister and my mom, hey, come on, you guys need to come out and see this. And they brushed me off. I don't know what time it was, 8 or 9, 10 o'clock at night, but they really weren't interested in coming out and looking at that. And so the next morning, you know, I got up and whatever, and I realized that I had changed, you know, that something had changed in me, and that there was a kind of an awakening inside of me because of this experience, and I didn't know who I was anymore. And it basically blew my mind and my whole sense of identity, and I didn't know if I should read the paper or get a bowl of cereal or, you know, whatever the case may be. But what I learned over those months was that my soul had awakened to a deeper degree because of my curiosity, because of my contemplation, because of my desire to know more about life and about reality and about myself. And I learned that this soul was here to love and to nurture and to protect and to develop this personality that I was, Michael Mason, this 18-year-old kid who was profoundly sensitive and profoundly insecure and scared. And so it was my job to love and to nurture him. And at that time I didn't have an identity, and I utilized old thoughts and old, you know, different things to attach to as a sense of identity because I didn't know who I was. But I was transitioning into adulthood, and I was, you know, transitioning into my mystical nature, and excuse me. And so I was on that path to learning how to love myself, And I remember, you know, probably about 4 years later, I was working in a manufacturing facility, and I asked myself, you know, the most sincere question, you know, how can I find inner peace? And it was the first time that my clairaudient skills became apparent in terms of my ability to hear spirit. And there was a female voice in my head, and she said, you know, give your life to God. And you know, I kind of giggled and I laughed, and I was like, how am I supposed to do that, you know? And I was sharing this experience with my mom's husband at the time. And he was like, you know, years ago I read this book called Putting on the Mind of Christ by Jim Marion, and it talks about this what you're talking about, this silent witness, you know, the soul. And he goes, you know, you should read it or whatever. And I don't remember if I purchased it online or if he gave me a copy, but so I started, you know, reading, you know, Putting on the Mind of Christ. And I remember I would sit at lunch or a break in the corner of the shop, the parts shop, and I remember like laughing and crying and just, you know, at that point in my life, you know, coming to the realization that, you know, that's what I was going to commit myself to do. I was going to learn how to put on the mind of Christ and to give my life to love, to be a vessel for God's love. And, you know, at the time I was apprentice mechanic at a manufacturing facility. You know, I was, you know, just got married. I think my wife at the time was pregnant with our first daughter, and, you know, she had a daughter when we met who was probably, you know, 6 or 7 at the time. And then, you know, and over the years, you know, there was a lot of things going on in my life. You know, not only was I seeking to surrender myself to be the full expression of God's love, I was, you know, 5 years later or so, I became the maintenance engineering manager there, or the assistant manager. We had another child, on and off. We had, you know, her family living with us sometimes, whether it was her mother or dad, or we took care of her niece and nephew for many years. And so, you know, at the time, you know, I was working that job, and I kind of taken on other side jobs, and I even threw a paper route in the morning for many years off and on to just make ends meet in terms of being able to pay for a mortgage and car payments and things like that. I was really in hustle mode while our kids were young, and then my ex-wife at the time started going to Delta so she could, ultimately become a registered nurse. And so, I was really busy in terms of being a father, being a husband, being a manager, busting my ass, and also being a spiritual mystic and learning how to give myself to God and to love. And over those years, from, let's say, that 22-year-old period where I was told to give myself to God to maybe 12 years later, when my full-blown Kundalini awakening started, I had slowly but surely made a commitment to these three tenets. And I was developing my virtue. I was developing my intellectual or masculine energy, and I was developing my ability to be present. I was developing my ability to be in my heart and to open my heart. I was developing my my ability to refine my intellect. And so the first commitment was to becoming the full expression of love, to becoming the full expression of God's love in every single moment of my life. Years later, I decided I wanted to be inspired by the love of God in every single moment of my life. And then years later, maybe towards the end, I decided I wanted to be the full expression of patience, because I realized how impatient I was in many respects. Maybe partially because how excited I am about life and how committed I am to the journey and the joy that exists in this experience, but nevertheless impatient. So those were my commitments. I remember many times on my way to work praying to let the universe allow me to be a vessel for God's love to work through me. And obviously, slowly but surely, again, like we talked about in the intro, late 2012, early 2013, that paradoxical energy started moving through me, and I really started to become very, very animated in my energy, and there was a lot of circumstances that occurred that kind of became a catalyst for me to fully step into this. Obviously, I had met a younger woman at the workplace who I had a very profoundly strong connection with. And it really made me start to question what was possible in terms of intimacy and love and relationship. And it made me kind of question in terms of what I wanted in my life. I had been working towards... I had signed up for a life coaching class that I was going to take that summer in 2013. That was a 3-week long class because, over the years I'd been so committed to being a family man and to giving and becoming a bridge for others. And it wasn't until those last couple of years that I realized that I had to start giving back to myself, and I had to start pursuing things that were ultimately going to fulfill my heart and soul. And so, I made some of those commitments and so on and so forth. And I think that we could probably go more deeply into this in other shows. But, this great awakening opened in me, and I started having visions, and I started experiencing what they call synchronicity. And I started experiencing symbolism and a greater understanding for the nature of the universe, where paradox is truly the way that things kind of exist. And so, I spent many years going through transformation. I left that marriage that was a 12-year marriage that summer, 2013, and I was really in such a profoundly illuminated state and overwhelmed by the Holy Spirit that in early 2014, I think February, I left that job as an assistant chief engineer at that manufacturing facility because I really couldn't do my work. I was in a really deep deep place. I was in the ocean of love, the ocean of God consciousness. I was overwhelmed, and I was in survival mode, really. And so I left that, and I spent many years through tremendous healing and tremendous suffering and tremendous transformation through so many layers of pain that I believe that I incurred from my many lifetimes here on this planet. And, I remember, one year in maybe around 2016, and I had woke up and I started hearing music in my head, and it was like a choir. It was an angelic choir, and the heavens were singing to me. The angels were singing to me in my head, and they were nurturing me, and they were comforting me through all my pain and suffering. and it gives you this great realization that even though sometimes we all go through some really dark things, and we go through some tremendously painful experiences, that we're always being loved and held and nurtured by the unseen, and that they're watching us through this pain and this struggle, and that they're there to hold us until we find our way out, so through this many years of transformation, I've learned essentially that two things, that I'm here to walk the shoes of Christ in this lifetime, and that second, I'm here to bring a practical brand of spirituality to mass consciousness. It's not necessarily mainstream at this point, but that I am here to usher in a new age of Aquarius and to help provide a framework to help people develop themselves individually, spiritually, and to empower themselves and to love themselves and to create a very tremendously harmonious and aligned life. And so, that's essentially, what I'm here to do. This next portion of the show is an opportunity for me to connect with you, the audience, and to support you to the highest degree possible. Here we take questions from you guys, and I answer them on air in a very personal way. So if you do have questions that you'd like to get answered on this program, you can email them to ibringwater@michaelmason.us. You can message me on Instagram at michaelmason.us, or you can message me on the Instagram for this show, the ibringwater show. Okay, so the question that we have this time is from Ryan Bell. He's 24. He's from Stockton, California, same as myself. And he asks, how do I deal with mistakes and failure? How do I deal with how people feel towards me when this happens? And so my answer would be, Ryan, more compassion for yourself and loving allowance for your growth process. And what I mean by that is it's really easy to get caught up in our ideals. It's really easy to get caught up in the pressure of life. It's really easy to give ourselves a short window for success or failure. But the reality is we are always in this process of growth, and the more that we can come to the understanding and to give ourselves this loving allowance and recognition that life is a continuous process of growth, it allows us to recognize when we've fallen short from our standards, and it allows us to then slowly but surely refine our game and get a little better and a little better and a little better each time. So as we learn to make a commitment to stop judging ourselves, we come to see that the judgments that we receive from others is simply a reflection of their own unresolved relationship with themselves and their lack of kindness to themselves. And so you know, we're always going to shoot air balls in life. We're always going to throw gutter balls. And, that's simply the game of life that we play. So, and here ultimately, authentic confidence, it grows from learning to know ourselves, who we are on the deepest level possible, and learning to love ourselves on the deepest level possible. And we do this by learning how to show up congruently in our heart consistently. Well, I have to say that this has certainly been an interesting adventure putting together this pilot episode, and it's definitely been more emotional than I thought it would be. But I am really proud of myself and proud of the fact that I'm finally putting my voice and my energy and my love out into the universe, and I know that there's a lot of good things to come with this work. And so, with that said, I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode of the I Bring Water Show. Until next time, my friends, stay thirsty for life. I love you.